Want help to grow your business? Download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.
Hi, welcome to this issue of Think Global China edition. My name's David Thomas, and it's great to have the opportunity to talk to you about Chinese investment into Australia. So our topic today is how do you raise money from Chinese entrepreneurs and investors? And today I'm really pleased that I'm joined by my business partner in Think Global, Vanessa Xing. Hi, Vanessa.
Thank you, David. I'm really nice to be here.
And we're going to talk about raising money from entrepreneurs, from investors and others. I'm going to cover a number of topics and we're going to discuss them together. What we're going to cover is a quick recap of the China opportunity for small business owners. We're going to look at who the new Chinese investors are and what they want. We'll look at some things that you should consider to make sure that your business is investment ready for China. I'm going to talk about the key question you need to answer about how do you structure your company or your product or the opportunity to attract a potential investment from China. And we're going to look at how you can source quality investors and entrepreneurs. A lesson in guanxi, we'll talk about that a bit later, and why it's so important when you're doing business or raising money from China. And then finally, we're going to talk about some do's and don'ts for maintaining relationships with an investor, because from our experience, you can have a willing investor and a willing seller, but actually putting that relationship together and making it work can be a real challenge. So that's what we're going to cover today. So let's get started. Now, first of all, one of the statements that I've made in previous issues is that I think every small business needs to get involved in the China opportunity. And there's no greater opportunity right now than attracting investment from China as part of what we call their going out strategy. And in previous issues, I've shown you this map, which shows you every dot represents a deal done by a Chinese investor somewhere in the world in the energy sector as they go out and look to invest in resources, in commodities, in coal, in iron ore, in terms of developing and creating energy security. And when you look at this map, this actually represents all investment by China around the world. You can see that it's pretty widely spread across Europe, across America, Canada, Africa, South America, and in Australasia as well. And in my view, this wave has only really just begun. But what's really exciting and interesting for us in the small business sector is that instead of that investment being driven by government, by institutions and by state-owned enterprises, in the last 12 months or so, we've started to see the investment move to the private sector. It's now being driven by entrepreneurs, by high net worth individuals, by business migrants, and by those running small business who are looking to participate in new industries around the world. And this is all part of what China calls going out, which is a big priority for them as they go forward into this next cycle of planning, which is their next 5-year plan, which will be released later this year. Now, they've already told us in their current 5-year plan the areas of interest to them, and I think that's where we should start. And I'm going to start by asking Vanessa, as we deal with Chinese investors, and as we start now talking to entrepreneurs and investors as they look to invest overseas, where are we seeing those opportunities? Which sectors are they now talking about?
The new wave of investors are more interested in diversifying their investment in different areas, and the property is a big interest from them, for sure, because Chinese love properties, as everyone knows, it's building in their blood. And we can also see the interest in the healthcare sector, education, tourism,
and services
and
the
financial services actually is also a very key area that Chinese are interested.
So let's start with property. We get a lot of inquiries from investors in the property space. What do you think is driving that, and what do you think they're interested in?
Property is a big area, and there's commercial properties and there's residential properties. Commercial properties are more driven by the big companies looking for yields. stable yields. So we can see the big insurance company, they come in to buy the commercial properties, and we can see the banks and the big companies with the funds that they need to invest into the property but are looking for stable yields. This is probably the area that small business can't participate. The other area of interest is residential properties. In China, people don't have the right to own the freehold properties. So in Australia, owning a property in permanent status is really attractive to Chinese. So they like to come and buy houses because they grow up in the apartments, and they like to own the property forever that they can pass on to next generations.
Yeah, we're certainly seeing property rises across the board, not just in Australia, but also all over the world. And a lot of this is driven by the Chinese. To some extent, the property market in China has slowed a bit, and that's one of the reasons they're looking to diversify.
Yes, and they're also because of the restriction of how many investment properties they can buy. So the people, if they can't buy the properties in China, they're looking at buying overseas. And also in the last 5 or 10 years, the Chinese property has gone up so much, so they're slowing down the growth rate. But however, the overseas properties in the majority cities like London, New York, Sydney, Melbourne, those major cities, they have gone up in the value. So the Chinese investors see the long-term investment, the owning a freehold property that they can pass on to the next generations.
And how does that translate, do you think, to small business opportunities on the ground? Because from my experience, many of the Chinese investors we're dealing with have not actually got much experience in property development or investment. They've made all their money in some other area, and now they're coming to a Western country and getting on the ground and starting to invest in property. That creates lots of business for the locals as well.
Yes, of course. Chinese investors, they might make their first bucket of gold or accumulate their wealth in the other industries. However, when they go to overseas, and they generally like to look at property investment because it's safe. And end of the day, if there's nothing else, you still have a house or have a land. And the other thing that they like into the property developments, projects or property investments are because you can start small. You can make big projects, but however, if you have a small capital, you can also test the market with a small project. But however, those people, the Chinese investors, they come into the market without much knowledge of local financial and regulation environment. They need a lot of help. That's where the small businesses can play the role.
Yeah, so builders, developers, architects.
Yeah, so if you can provide your professional advices and also your knowledge of the local market to the Chinese investors, that could help you build your business as well.
Yeah, lawyers, accountants, everybody.
Well, they definitely need lawyers and accountants. Yeah.
And we found that the Chinese often don't like to pay for services, but they do in this area because they know it's an area where they don't have much experience often.
Yes, of course. They feel safe when there's accountant and lawyers and architect professionals involved, and they understand they need to pay for professional services. Even they don't like to do that in China, but they, along the development of the Chinese economy, and they learned that they have to pay professional services.
Yeah. So I think properties are quite a hot area right now, and we're getting a lot of inquiries from wealthy individuals in China looking to invest in property markets overseas.
Yes, I would say to Chinese investors, and that's good to find partners. I would say to small business in local market, you can contribute your know-how and your local knowledge, so you can add value into Chinese investment, the Chinese investors' investment, that they would recognize your value, and it could be a long-term relationship.
Yeah. Now let's talk about another area, healthcare. That's another area of interest right now. We're starting to see more and more interest in that sector. Can you give us some reasons for that?
Healthcare is a really interesting sector. If you walk into any of the Chinese hospitals, you would see glamorous building and all the glowing equipments. So in the last 10 years, China has spend a lot of money to buy to build infrastructures and build treatment equipments. So you can see all sort of equipments which cost millions and millions of dollars. They buy from overseas to attract the patients to come to this hospital. And however, they also started to privatize some of the public hospital, which is running in lost position. When the private company coming in to the hospitals and running the hospital, they like to make money in the operation. They not only look at the treatments, they also look at the recovery. The recovery area is still quite behind in China. And we realize that in the developed countries, recovery equipments are a lot more advanced, and the recovery services are a lot more advanced. So the China, in the healthcare sectors, they not only needs recovery equipment, they also need education and trainings of their nurses and healthcare people who are trained properly to help the patients in the recovery area.
Yeah, we've actually recently done quite an interesting deal in this space with a Chinese investor investing in a medical equipment supplier in Australia. This is actually quite a small business where they manufacture and design high-end hospital equipment like wheelchairs and hospital beds. And with our Chinese investor has been in the process of buying public hospitals, refurbishing them, turning them into private hospitals, and now he's looking to import equipment from an advanced country like Australia into China, and we found that's creating some really exciting opportunities.
Well, yes, and recovery equipments can be quite wide. And the interesting thing is that the Chinese investor find that during their process of acquiring, refurbishing the public hospitals and try to turn it in profit in the private hospital, and they need lots of equipments. And some of the equipments from Western countries, they haven't even seen it in China.
Yeah.
And it can be really, really simple equipments. It's like the chair in the shower.
Yeah.
That helps the elderly people or help the disabled people having a shower.
Yeah.
And there's things like the bed rail.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of small things which is quite simple. However, it's got a lot of knowledge of a Western country where they have practiced, they have tested, and it's really practical for the patients.
Yes. We've also had some experience of working with a private hospital that wanted to attract Chinese tourists or people traveling overseas who've got the money to have an operation done in Sydney, as it happens. And this private hospital we found had quite a good idea, but there's a lot of thinking to be done to make sure it works properly.
Well, yes, I think that for small businesses and
To continue enjoying this presentation, download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.